The Giants had a fight at training camp, but we're going to talk about Brian Daboll and how he's handled that and some other things that Brian Daboll has done to establish himself as head coach of the New York Giants. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and happy to have you with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And on today's show, we were originally going to do Twitter Tuesday. I'm actually going to push Twitter Tuesday to Thursday because I don't have enough questions just yet to do a show around it. So you still have time if you want to get involved with Twitter Tuesday. If you want to get a question in, all the information you need is in the show notes below. So what I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about head coach Brian Daboll. And in particular, this idea was kind of inspired by the fight that took place on Monday in training camp, and how Daboll has handled it, as well as some of the things Daboll has done this summer that I think has really resonated with his players. So that is the topic of today's show. Happy to have you with us. Let's kick things off with the main story. And the main story, of course, is there was a ruckus at Giants training camp on Monday. Tempers did flare. It was another hot, humid, just an awful day. I mean, this is the type of dog day of summer that we often hear about and talk about. And the players, just an awful day weather-wise. So what happened was on a play, Saquon Barkley, I guess, lowered his shoulder a little too hard, ran into Aaron Robinson. Tempers were already at high because, when you're outside and you're sweating and you're uncomfortable, you tend to be a little short-tempered. It happens to the best of us. And Tate Crowder, I think, took exception to how Barkley ran into Robinson. And then one thing led to another. There were some punches thrown between John Feliciano, the center, and I believe Cam Brown was the other player involved. And just a real, bad moment for the Giants. Now, bad moment aside, let's talk about how Brian Daboll handled it, because it was a complete 180 compared to how Joe Judge handled a similar fracas last year in training camp. Head coaches will always tell you that they want to see physicality, they want to see intensity, they want to see their players get after it. Obviously, though, they want to see their players be smart, which means, simply put, you're not putting guys on the ground. You're not throwing punches. You're going to try and keep your cool within the confines of, whistle to whistle. So after this fracas happened and everybody was separated, Daboll had everybody gather around him. And he spoke for, I don't know how long it was. It was a few minutes. I think some people said it was like 10 minutes. I don't think it was quite that long. And I don't know what Daboll said to the team, but here's what I do know. Number one, there wasn't a loud, expletive-filled tirade that you could hear two towns over, like there was last year with Joe Judge. Number two, to my knowledge, nobody was kicked out of practice. That includes players and coaches. There was I think I saw somebody said that Bobby Johnson got in the middle of the fracas. And I think it was just, him trying to get in between guys more than anything. But nobody was kicked out of practice, right? After Daboll spoke to everybody, said what he had to say, he pretty much, resumed practice, and there was not another flare-up the rest of the way. Now, why is this a big deal? Why is this important? Why am I mentioning it? Again, coaches tell us all the time when it comes to training camp that they want to see a physical camp. They want to see a competitive camp. They want to see guys get after it. That's what happens in a football game. You have to be intense, but You also have to be smart and disciplined so as not to let tempers get the better of you. All right. So Daboll, perhaps, and now I'm just, I'm speculating. Obviously, Daboll did not speak to the media after the whole practice ended, but perhaps Daboll realized or said to himself, I asked these guys to come out here and be physical and intense and all that stuff. And yeah, they carried it a little too far, but for me to punish them would have been hypocritical. All right. So Daboll didn't have the guys run any kind of punishment laps like Judge did. To my knowledge, there weren't any fines or anything like that. I don't know for sure if there were fines last year from Judge, but he was pretty steamed last year. That I do remember. And just two totally different ways of handling a similar fracas. So what does that kind of tell you about Brian Daboll? Well, it tells you that Daboll treats these guys like adults. All right. Look, nobody wants to get yelled at by their boss, no matter what the circumstances or situation. It's kind of embarrassing, especially when you're doing it in front of, your fans and the media who are going to, write it up and report about it and talk about it. Nobody wants to be yelled at. But Daboll didn't single anybody out. He didn't embarrass the team. He basically took control of the situation, said what he had to say, and then, hey, guys, let's get back to work. We got a lot of work to do. And we don't have time to be sitting here and stewing in our own juices. And I just thought that was a really, really mature way for him to handle what could have otherwise been an ugly situation. And afterwards, the players, they brought out a couple of players to talk to the media, Daniel Bellinger being one. And of course, the players were asked about the message. And Bellinger basically said that Daboll's message to the team was, guys, let's be physical, let's be intense, but let's be smart. All right. Which means don't be throwing punches. Don't be, taking extra shots at each other. So just, a situation that was unfortunate. You never like to see, although back in the days, if you remember the days of Richie Seibert and Keith Hamilton, those two used to go at it literally daily when we used to have two-a-days. But Brian Daboll, I thought, handled the whole situation really well. And I thought it spoke a lot about him and how he interacts with the team, how he interacts with the staff. To a degree, you have to trust people to be mature, responsible adults. And I'm not saying that punishment isn't warranted in certain circumstances, but in this circumstance, Daboll probably realized, look, I asked for these guys to go out there and be intense and to be physical. So for me to punish them would be hypocritical. So, again, I don't know if that's what his thought process is. That's what my assumption is. And I know what they say about assuming, but that's my take on it. And I think Daboll really handled the situation well. And it spoke volumes about what kind of head coach he is. Now, coming up on the program, I have a couple of other thoughts about Brian Daboll and some of the things that have come out about him and how he's been handling the team in his first summer training camp. So stick around. We'll be right back with more. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and without the sugar. Most Built Bars contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And they taste great because they're covered in real milk chocolate. Built Bar offers 9 amazing flavors in nut and nut-free variety, plus a limited time rotation of special flavors that changes up roughly every so many weeks. So head on over to BuiltBar.com today and use our special promo code LOCKED15 to take 15% off your first order. Again, that promo code is LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina. And if you came here looking for Twitter Tuesday, my apologies, folks. Didn't have enough questions for Twitter Tuesday, but we will do Twitter Thursday. I promise you. I know Thursday night is the game. We'll preview the game, Not that there's a whole lot to preview because it's not really, it's not going to count and there's not going to be any game planning or anything like that. But we'll talk about the game probably on tomorrow's show. We will do Twitter Thursday this week. I will answer your questions. So you still have time to send them in. Please get them in to me. I will record the show for Twitter Thursday on Wednesday night, and I'll put it out a little earlier. I've been putting out the summer training camp shows early so that those of you who like to listen to them in the evening can get new content when you come home and you unwind and relax. So that's the plan for this week. We're talking about Brian Daboll and how he has approached some of the macro responsibilities as head coach. And so far, got to tell you, I like what I've seen from Brian Daboll. This next point I want to talk about is an important one. And that is earlier this week, actually on Sunday, I should say, Daboll was asked about the plans to regarding play time for the players in New England, the preseason opener. And Daboll's approach basically was, look, if you're healthy and you're able to play, you're going to play. So none of this, well, I'm going to sit my starters and I'm going to play the backups because I want to learn more about them. None of this, well, player X, Y, and Z worked really hard all week and the GPS said that, they're reaching their max load. So we're going to sit them down and rest them. None of that. All right. And I like this approach for many reasons. Number one, it's besides the fact it's different from what the previous coaching staff did. This is a team that has a new offense and a new defense. I don't care how much time they got in practice. You've got to get into a real live game scenario. Okay. The Patriots are not going to pull up if they get into the backfield and say, oh my God, we can't hit the quarterback. We can't bring the quarterback to the ground. We can't tackle Saquon Barkley or Matt Breida or any of the running backs. No, this is going to be pretty close to a real game, right? Even though there's no game planning, even though there's no matchups or anything like that, this is going to be pretty close to a real game. So why not see in real game scenario, when you only have 3 games, especially, why not see what you have? And that's what Daboll's going to do. He's going to play his starters because they do need the work. And this is going to be on offense and defense. This will give the coaching staff an opportunity to see what's working and what isn't working against competition that is not wearing the NY on the helmet like the other side is. It's also an opportunity to keep these guys fresh, right? So what Daboll has done throughout the summer is, yes, they are still looking at GPS data and all that good stuff, but guys that need to practice, like Daniel Jones, he has not missed a practice rep. Saquon Barkley has not missed a practice rep. For the most part, I don't think some of the receivers, I know Kenny Golladay, they backed off a little bit here and there. They backed off a little bit on Kadarius Toney, but the point is they've been out there every day doing something. So rather than say, okay, we're going to push these guys hard in practice where it's a controlled environment and they're protected, and then we're going to back them off in the games. No, Daboll's doing the opposite. He's saying, look, let's manage the practice workload where we need to, still getting these guys, reps or some kind of activity so that they don't go stale or develop any kind of rust. And then we'll play them in the game, right? That's a good approach, in my opinion. Because the last thing you want is for these guys to be sitting on the sideline collecting, while moss grows on them. And I know it's just one game, but folks, you're not going to get better if you're not out there practicing. And we talk about, players talk about mental reps, coaches talk about mental reps. That's got to be one of my least favorite terms that they use in sports. Mental reps mean squat. I can sit there, for those of you who don't know, I play guitar. Not really well just yet, but I play guitar. And I could sit there and I can watch, my favorite guitarist / play. And I could say, okay, I'm taking mental reps. I'm taking note of, how he's doing it. But that doesn't mean that when I pick up my guitar, I'm going to be able to play like Slash. No way. Doesn't mean that. So the point is you have to practice. You have to do it. You have to see how it's done. You have to learn about it, and you have to do it. That's the important thing. So mental reps, I'm sorry, if I never hear that term again, I'll be so happy because it's just so overrated, that term, and it just doesn't belong in football. So Daboll, like I said, is planning on playing guys. If they are deemed healthy, they will be out there. And even if it's, for a series or two, just get them some live reps because there is no substitution for live reps. Practices and training camp are in a controlled environment. And like I said, there's no substitution for facing a different opponent, somebody who you haven't seen for the last 10 practices or so, that, at this point, what they're going to do or what the defense might do. So I tip my hat to Daboll for taking that approach. It's a slightly different approach. It's one that, prior staffs have taken. The last staff, maybe not so much so. So we'll see if it makes a difference for the Giants when they play on Thursday night, but I like the thinking behind it. Okay, and one other point I want to make about the Daboll's decision to play everybody who is healthy in the games. Conditioning. We talk about how he wants to see better improved conditioning of the players. Well, despite the coach's attempts to simulate that in practice, it's just not the same as it is in a game. So why would you not give your players an opportunity to go out there in a game scenario and really experience that game day conditioning with the full pads on and everything, running around, pushing, other guys and stuff like that. It's just, if you want to improve your conditioning, you've got to get out there and you've got to do it. It's that simple. All right. Coming up, I have one more thing. This is actually a cool little nugget that one of the players dropped during his pressers about Brian Daboll and how he's been handling his first training camp. Stick with us and I'll tell you what it is. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, if you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Well, now Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need. Visit the App Store today and download Dave. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500. Future you will thank you. Terms and conditions apply. Instant transfer fees apply. Visit dave.com/legal for complete information. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina. And a reminder again, Twitter Thursday is coming. All right, we were supposed to do Twitter Tuesday. I didn't get enough questions. You still have time to get some questions in. Come on, I want a nice big mailbag. It's been a long time since we've done a Twitter mailbag here on the podcast. So get those questions in and I will answer. Usually I try and answer all of them that come in, but sometimes we have overlap. I will do my best to answer as many as possible because your questions are important and it's actually one of my favorite shows to do and I've missed doing it. So hope to hear from y'all. Check out the show notes for information on how to send your questions in. Email is LockedOnGiantsPodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet them to me at Patricia_Traina, TRAINA, with the hashtag AskPTrain so that I find them on my Twitter tweet deck. So that's the plan for Thursday. All right. We are talking about Brian Daboll and how he's handled the training camp so far. So I talked a little bit about his response to the fracas that happened on Monday. I talked a little bit about his decision to play as many players as he can that are healthy in the preseason game Thursday night. And now I want to talk about something that's kind of cool. Something that John Feliciano actually tipped the media off to. And that is apparently Brian Daboll lets these guys sleep in. I know that sounds silly, but Feliciano, actually, let me give you a little timeline here, behind the scenes timeline. For training camp, Daboll has been meeting with the media at 9:30 in the morning. He does his presser and then they go out to practice. Now, my understanding is the players, and this is according to John Feliciano, don't have to come in for their first meeting of the day until 9 o'clock in the morning. So, hey, that's an opportunity to sleep in a little bit. That is an opportunity to catch the tail end of any rush hour traffic up in the very congested northern New Jersey area. And it's an opportunity for them to do what they need to do, maybe have a leisurely breakfast with their families before coming to work. It's not a bad deal. So the players come in, they have a meeting at 9. Daboll, like I said, meets with the media around 9:30. Then they practice usually around 10 o'clock. It goes till noon. Then afterwards, there's more media sessions with the players. That's from I want to say from 12 to maybe 1:30, depending on how things go. And then in the meantime, the players are eating lunch. They're lifting, they're doing what they need to. And then the rest of the day is meetings. And then I think they have a walkthrough practice at some point later in the afternoon when it cools down a little bit. So that's pretty much how the training camp day is structured for the New York Giants. Really not a bad way to do it. Now, in the past, just to give you a point of comparison, what would happen is the Giants would start 7 in the morning. There would be breakfast available for those who wanted it. There would be an early morning meeting. Then there might be a walkthrough, and then there would be media sessions. And then after that, there would be the main practice. And then you would have more media sessions and then more meetings. So it's a little different way of doing things. Every coach sets up his day in training camp a little differently. If I were a player, I would love this setup, and not just because, it's a later start to the day, because usually a later start to the day means you're going to be there longer, but it just, I don't know, it just allows the players, to do what they need to do at home. If they are staying at home, I think some of them are staying in a team hotel, and, it's just a better setup. And I could tell that the players, Feliciano in particular, is appreciative of it, the opportunity to sleep in, get that extra rest and whatnot. So just a really, different way of looking at things. Now, all this stuff, all these points I've been talking about, ladies and gentlemen, won't mean anything if this team doesn't win. Now, I have said all along, I don't believe the Giants are going to push for a playoffs berth this year, although you never say never. But I do think they're going to win a few more than just 4 games like they won last year. I think they're going to win a few more games. Optimistically speaking, I could see maybe 8 games if everything falls into place. The point is you want to start the upward trend. You don't want to keep going down like the Giants have been doing the last several years. You want to start ascending. I think they will. I like what Daboll's doing. We'll see how the players execute the offense, the defense. We'll see if they have what they need to be competitive. There's still a lot of training camp to go. There's the 3 preseason games to go. But so far, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, I think the Giants are on the right track. And I really believe that better days are ahead for those of us who have suffered over the last decade through what can arguably be nicknamed wilderness years too. All right, Giant fans, that is going to do it for me on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. As always, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Make sure you keep it here all week long. We're going to talk a little bit about the preseason game, the preseason opener against the Patriots on tomorrow's show. Twitter Thursday. On Friday, we'll recap the game with some observations and takeaways. So plenty more still to come here on the LockedOn Giants podcast this week. Until then, everybody, have a great one.